It's really, really abysmal. It's really abysmal. So the fact that a ceasefire was passed is good, but means nothing.
Hi, I'm Sarah Forster, news editor here at The National, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of A Closer Look. Now, we are 5 months into the conflict between Israel and Gaza, and the UN has recently passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. To find out what that means, we're going to get our journalist Nada Al-Taher from the Foreign Desk in to talk to us. Nada, thank you so much for joining me. So, Nada, the first thing that people are going to want to know when they see this news, UN calls for an immediate ceasefire. What will that change on the ground in Gaza?
Nothing. So far it's just text, on paper. People are still being killed. In the first 24 hours after the resolution was passed, the UN said children were killed in the double digits.
And sometimes it's difficult to know the exact death toll because there are bodies everywhere. They're difficult to be pulled out from under the rubble. The hospitals are overwhelmed. It's just simply difficult to count everybody. And so that's just 24 hours after the resolution is passed, and we're well past that, and more people have been killed. So if you ask a Gazan on the street right now what that means to him or her, they'll say it means nothing, because what they want right now is to eat and to be treated. That's what they want, and to bury their loved ones and to find them. They don't care about resolutions, and so far that hasn't changed anything.
And so Israel doesn't seem to be bound in any way to complying with the ceasefire.
No, the resolution is not non-binding. And what is interesting, though, is the U.S. position in all of this. Because the U.S. has vetoed similar resolutions in the past, and has even submitted its own version of that, which the wording there was very interesting because it called for an immediate ceasefire linked to the release of hostages, which is not what really anybody wants, because that's a separate issue. It's a political process on its own, and it's being talked about and negotiated in Qatar, and that's separate. The ceasefire is for humanitarian, for the humanitarian situation and for the sake of the people on the ground right there who are suffering every second. And the U.S. resolution was vetoed by China and Russia. So the fact that the U.S. actually didn't veto this most recent resolution and instead abstained, signals a change in the U.S. position towards Israel. And we've seen the U.S. rhetoric against or towards Israel actually change and become increasingly more opposing. And so the fact that the U.S. took an actual position by not taking a position may be the change, may signal a change in the U.S.-Israel relationship, but it's too soon to say that it's a rift. It's just a crack so far. So we're going to see what happens.
And do we know how Israel has reacted to the U.S. abstaining in that vote?
So Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, was scheduled to go to Washington, and shortly after U.S. Abstained, he canceled his trip, which is... it sends a message in and of itself, right? So that's been the Israeli position. And like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next. I think it's too soon to tell what the U.S.-Israeli relationship, which has always been a quote-unquote special relationship, will look like. That is not to say that they're not friends anymore, but it's, there's certainly some sort of a disagreement on how things are going and what the next steps are.
So, as I mentioned at the start, we are now well into the 5th month of conflict. We were hearing a lot of reports when it started about how the situation was deteriorating, unraveling. It's obviously only got worse since then. Can you tell me what it's like now?
We speak to people on the ground almost every day. We formed connections with them. We know what their families are going through, but even just if you look at it on a macro level, there are no fully functioning hospitals in Gaza. Zero. There are semi or partially functioning. And by functioning, we mean that there are doctors there, sure, but there's no medical equipment. There's a lack of basic necessities like medical kits, anesthesia, even things that are used for cleaning wounds. And so people are developing infections, people are having to have their limbs severed because it's as a life-saving measure. And then, of course, you have the fact that people are dying of hunger, literally dying of hunger. We're not even, on the brink of a thing. No, we are seeing people dying of hunger. And this is Ramadan. A lot of people that we spoke to ahead of Ramadan said that they were looking forward to Ramadan because then they would have an excuse to tell their children on why they're eating one meal a day. Some people were picking, herbs from the ground to feed their children. One person said that he was, his child was asking for milk, so he just mixed flour with water and told him this is milk. It's really, really abysmal. It's really abysmal. So the fact that a ceasefire was passed is good, but means nothing.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of A Closer Look, brought to you from right here inside the National's newsroom. Don't forget, you can find all of our previous episodes on our YouTube channel.